A medical service, a music project, or a journalism campaign. Those are just some of the projects being realized with the help of crowdfunding. In 2016, 128.2 million Swiss francs have been raised via crowdfunding in Switzerland alone. Mirko Bischofberger is responsible for the science projects at the crowdfunding platform WeMakeIt and joins me today. So Mirko, what exactly is crowdfunding?
So crowdfunding is basically the notion of raising capital, raising funds through many people, usually through the web or through the internet, so splitting it into many small amounts.
But there are many types of crowdfunding, right?
Exactly. So there is crowdfunding in the sense of crowd investment, where you participate in the capital, crowd lending, where you lend the money or donations. And then there is the most known, is the classic crowd supporting, one can call it, which usually people call crowdfunding, is where you get rewards back. So it's campaigns that usually go through Kickstarter, Indiegogo, Switzerland, it's WeMakeIt. So you help out somebody to launch his campaign and you get back a reward in the form of a CD, a part of a movie, a DVD, a concert.
Okay, so I mentioned the 128.2 million Swiss francs raised in 2016 in the beginning, which is a plus of over 360% compared to the year ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So the volume is increasing year by year. Crowdfunding is trending in general. But this year is especially big, has been the crowd lending part. So a lot of small companies have raised money through lending, but all sectors, so from crowdfunding, supporting, crowd investment, all have grown.
So with the lending, then you would have to give the money back.
Exactly.
But you work at, you're a scout at WeMakeIt, where you actually don't need to give anything back.
Well, you do give back rewards, right? So you help out somebody to launch his campaign and you get something back. And I'm especially interested in promoting the science sector there. So crowdfunding has been very strong in culture, has been very strong in journalism, tourism, food sectors. And this is the things we hear daily, on a daily basis by now. But it's often the smaller volumes, actually. The big campaigns are often in tech, entrepreneur, innovation. So what usually has been coming out from universities, going into industry economy, now we see also going through crowdfunding.
That's very interesting that you're mentioning that, because I think most of the people, they know crowdfunding through a friend who is bringing out a new CD or a movie project. But you said the biggest part or the biggest volume is actually achieved in the tech sector, science sector?
In terms of volume it is. In terms of number of projects, it's less. So it's few projects, not few, but it's less projects with bigger amounts, while in the culture sector, it's many projects with smaller amounts. And that's obvious, right? So your friend needs 20,000 francs to do his CD, but the little startup needs a few 100,000 francs to get started.
Okay, so what makes a crowdfunding campaign successful?
Basically, crowdfunding is also about testing an idea in the market. And so what makes it successful if you touch a nerve, of course, right? So one of the most prominent examples we had in the last years was definitely the Rift, Oculus Rift, Facebook, the VR glasses. They have been launched as a crowdfunding campaign in 2012, if I remember correctly. So they wanted $250,000 on Kickstarter and they got 2.5 million. So they touched a nerve. Everybody talks about VR now. They talked about it 5 years ago, and then they've been bought by Zuckerberg, Facebook, and are now one of the major brands in virtual reality. And so, yeah.
That's a project in the US. Okay. What about Switzerland? Is there a project that is very dear to you?
Yeah, there is a beautiful project called HORAO, which is launched by an MD from the University Hospital in Bern. It's a doctor and a team of doctors, of surgeons actually, who are working how to remove tumors from brain, but they don't see exactly where the difference between where the tumor ends and where the healthy brain starts. And so in order to visualize better this border and to do the operations better, they needed some instruments that they had to develop and some money. So they came to us, to WeMakeIt. We helped them with their campaign, and it was a beautiful campaign. They reached, I think, 70,000 francs. And so this is real science bringing humanity a step further.
So what do you have to do to reach your goal? What are the tips, advices that you give to them? I mean, you cannot just put it up online. Exactly.
So we always say you need definitely to have a clear communication. A lot of people, especially in the tech and academic sectors, they are very in a jargon world. They speak in a complicated language, so you have to break it down and also find out what is the story they really want to tell. Then it's about campaigning. It's called a crowdfunding campaign. So you have to prepare a campaign. It usually lasts a month, more or less, and that month has to be very well planned ahead. What do you do on day 1? Who you contact? What do you do on day 5? When do you go on the web? You know, so it's which newsletters do you get into? Which communities can you tap?
You have to work.
You have to work. You have to work, and you have to prepare the work. And the better you do this, the more viral it can get. And as with classic investment, it starts with friends and family. So first you have to convince your brother, your mother, friends of friends, and then it can grow in the internet and it can go all over the world.
What is the percentage of successful campaigns that WeMakeIt?
We have a very high success rate. It's around 65%, which is one of the highest in Europe. And we are convinced that it's due to our coaching, because we select, we help, we communicate, we coach, we prepare the campaign. We don't just let people run off into the web.
And you're also one of the biggest platforms in Europe, WeMakeIt.
Yeah, exactly. WeMakeIt is by now the 5th biggest in Europe. It's the 2nd biggest in German speaking. So it's really, really a big campaign. So for the crowdfunding sector we're discussing, in the last years have raised about 45 million francs, and about 30 was WeMakeIt. So we're clearly the main players.
So we're talking about success. What are the challenges?
The challenges are clearly how you communicate again, how you reach your audience, how you reach your communities. And the more complex the subject gets, the more tricky it is, right? So if you want to sell, as I said, something like VR glasses when they didn't exist, it touches a nerve. If you want to sell something that already exists, there's many small projects, CDs, films, it's much more hard, right?
I see. And then you also mentioned there, in the beginning it's successful. What's the flow?
So the typical flow is in the beginning. So let's say different. A typical crowdfunding campaign you can say after a third of its time if it's going to be successful or not. So the first third of time, so if you go for a month, after 10 days, you should be able to raise a third of the money already. If you don't manage, it's going to be really tricky. So the first third, you have to go quite quick. Then there is kind of a valley of death where it's a bit tedious, and at the end again, it's easier. And so that's why there's a lot of partnerships now with WeMakeIt, with Swisscom, with Mobiliar, and we have also with the Gebert Rüff Foundation for Science. We give money mainly in the middle part where it's the hardest to yeah, exactly.
And so you mentioned that the tech and science is growing bigger. Do you think that's a trend?
I think science and tech is definitely a trend, and it must be a trend in Switzerland. Switzerland is a country not with resources, hardware resources, but it's always been a country which goes with the head, right? Our biggest industries are in the service sectors and science sectors. The biggest industries like Roche, Novartis are brain products. And so our universities, our tech pipeline, our innovation pipeline is crucial, is the backbone of our country. And so yes, it's going to grow. It's going to grow mainly in Switzerland, I think, mainly here. And we need to boost it. So everybody needs to support and crowdfund.
But Novartis won't need a crowdfunding, I guess.
Maybe one day they will support a crowdfunding channel to be more visible again, to get new ideas into there. So it's not unimaginable that more and more ideas will go through crowdfunding into startups instead of going directly into a startup. And then, of course, the big companies can buy up things. As I said before, Rift has been bought by Facebook and became Oculus Rift.
Crowdfunding is mostly to raise money, I guess. Or is it also good for something else?
Crowdfunding is actually not in the first place to raise money, I would say, even if that's what everybody talks about. It's to create communities.
I mean, it's still funding.
Yeah, exactly, it's crowdfunding. But of course, so as I said again, if you're going to crowd investing, where you say you have a startup and you need capital, and that's where it's really about money. In the most cases we know, where it's friends starting their own businesses, it's actually as much about testing your idea and about creating a community, right? If you say you're going to open a restaurant and you need money, the day you open a restaurant, you can write a mail to a few thousand followers already. So I think the digital age has shown clearly that we need communities as much as we need products, and crowdfunding is also a way to create a community.
Because you make your project visible.
Exactly, exactly. So as I said before, we are used to the classic pipeline where a patent comes out of a university or of an industry, and then it becomes a startup, and then it grows, and it gets maybe bought in an exit strategy. Nowadays, there has been more and more examples where people start a crowdfunding campaign, test the idea, grow through the web, through communities, and then get bought at some point, like Oculus Rift.
How does that community building happen through crowdfunding? Why can you grow a community through it for someone that has never touched crowdfunding?
When we help you launching your campaign, we basically try to converge into, let's say, 3 communities that you need to tap. These can be related communities to your project. If you're an MD and if you look for new surgical instruments, you maybe try to get into the newsletter of some Swiss medical associations. But if, at the same time, if you're personal, somebody who plays golf, you can also tap the golf people, right? So depending on who you are, where you are, we try to identify the communities, try to find rewards that are interesting to them, so that you can pitch the idea in that community and pull them towards your product.
Talking of money, as we are seeing in Money Switzerland, how much money has WeMakeIt raised so far?
So WeMakeIt has raised so far about 30 million francs. So in our sector, it has been, crowdfunding has raised about 45 million in total.
Within a time span of?
Within a time span of since 2012, so 5 years. And so we're clearly the main players in that field. We have a traffic of about 300,000 people per month coming to the website, so it's also a very efficient communication tool. And projects, it's about 2,700, a bit more. So many projects, many people, lots of traffic, and lots of money. And both, as I said before, are important. So on one hand, it's about money, funding. On the other hand, it's about community and getting attention.
If you think of the future, where do you see crowdfunding campaigns in the future?
I can only give you my opinion. I think, as I mentioned before, that crowdfunding will become more and more mainstream. It will be obvious that maybe certain students with a great idea will launch their idea through crowdfunding instead of doing a classic startup first. Maybe first test your idea, see if there is some traction, and then with that go towards more classic startups.
So you can actually try and fail much easier without a big or like bad impact?
That's it, while collecting communities already in the emails.
Okay, very nice. Thank you so much,
Thank
Mirko.
you.